It is the tally of the season win totals that were the final win total. Now, these do move throughout the course of the year, but this was what it went off at over at DraftKings. And if you're looking, the Ravens, 13 wins. They went off at 8.5, beat their win total by 4.5 wins, as did the Texans that went off at 5.5 wins. With 10 on the regular season, they win 4.5 more games than they were projected. The Cowboys, 9.5 to 12, which is plus 3.5 games. Lions, 9.5 to 12, plus 2.5 games. Rams, 7.5 to 10 is plus 2.5. The Colts, 6.5 to 9 is plus 2.5 as well. And then the Bucks, 6.5 to 9 is plus 2.5. And, you know, this is one of those things you and I were talking about heading into the season when we were talking about some of these teams and what you expect of them throughout the course of the season. And so I just listed off to you 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different teams that exceeded win totals by at least 2.5 games. On the flip side, the Panthers set at 7.5. They won 2 games. 5.5 on the underside of that. Chargers, 9.5, only won 5 games, 4.5 to the under. Commanders, 7.5. They won 4, 3.5 to the under. The Patriots, how the hell were they at 7.5? 7.5.
So looking at some of these, you're just like, what was I doing?
Patriots, 7.5. They win 4 games, 3.5 to the under. Giants, 8.5. They win 6, 2.5 to the under. Cincinnati, we know how that goes. Joe Burrow gets injured, but 11.5, 9 wins for them. They're 2.5 to the under. And then Giants and Jets both 8.5 to 6, which is 2.5 under for the Giants. 9.5 to 7, which is 2.5 under for the Jets. Of course, we know Aaron Rodgers gets hurt at the very beginning of the season. But I think what this comes back around to is when you see these tallies here, Mike, we were kind of preaching, if you have conviction about a team, it might not hurt to play 70% of your bet on the regular number and then maybe put another 15% and another 15% on a couple of alts. And as we see, 7 different teams exceeded their win total by 2.5 games. Another 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 teams underachieved by at least 2.5 games. So there is money to be made in these alt markets with these win totals if you think that you have a bead, if you have a real conviction on how these teams are going to do.
Yeah, 15 of the 32 teams end up at least 2 games off of their total. I'll tell you this, if you're an NFL head coach, do not be negative 3.5 or more. You're fired. All 4 of them. They gone. So that's the key part there. The other thing that jumped out to me at this, the Ravens are plus 4.5. Harbaugh never once mentioned for Coach of the Year.
Yeah.
A lot of times when you see these big adjustments to the top or the bottom, that's where you're going to find your Coach of the Year candidates. And, Texans, obviously, D'Amico Ryans talked about quite a bit. And then the Browns, they're plus 1.5. But with everything that they went through from a quarterback perspective, and Stefanski, your other favorite, never got a mention when you look at the Ravens. And you think about beat Shanahan late in the year, beat McDaniel late in the year, but didn't get any love toward that Coach of the Year side. Other thing that jumps out to me here, 10 teams, a half game above or below. Pretty good.
Yeah.
They're pretty good at this.
Yeah. Oh, no. Definitely pretty good when it comes down to a lot of parity in the NFL this year, as well as we talked about, like no real standout team all year long. You know, I mean, we thought it was going to be the Niners, and then they got injured in those 3-game stretch where they looked mortal. I guess you could say the Ravens, but again, we'll talk about this whenever we get matchups for next week, but I am really curious what the Ravens look like if they find themselves at a 10-point deficit ever in the course of the playoffs. I do wonder what that looks like with them. But the thing that does kind of stand out here is that there is a story to be told for a lot of these teams when it comes down to if you were bullish on one side or the other. I mean, listen, if you look at the Cowboys sitting just at 9.5, we were looking at a team in a division where nobody thought the Giants or Washington was going to be strong. So you're looking at 4 easy divisional games. Then you kind of look out the rest of that. What was the ceiling and the upside for? I mean, it was Dak Prescott, and everyone, we assumed Tony Pollard was going to be good. We didn't really know that he was not going to be able to bounce back from this injury like we thought. But everyone, okay, Tony Pollard, Dak Prescott, you have CeeDee Lamb. Remember, it was the return of Michael Gallup to begin the year. We learned along the way, guys. I mean, listen, but this is all the stuff that we were talking about heading into the season. Gallup was going to be healthy. He was going to be a great number 2. And then, hey, pick your number 3. Is it Cooks? Yeah. Is it Tolbert? Is it whoever? So you could have talked yourself into an alt over on the Cowboys as well. The Lions obviously getting a ton of hype with Dan Campbell and all the things that were going on there with them last year on the offensive side of the ball. The biggest surprise to me, obviously, on this list, I think, is the Rams and Colts. Like this is just. I mean, we know the Texans. That's the team that's the wildest. But you look at the Rams and the Colts. I mean, these are teams where exceeding 2.5 games where we were thinking like, Anthony Richardson, he's going to win 3 games he shouldn't just because he's so ridiculously talented, but that's going to be it.
Well, and you lose him. It's Gardner Minshew for 14 of the starts. How you feeling now with that over?
Right.
Like, people are like, not very good. You know, we're going to have all this turmoil with Jonathan Taylor. Then he's going to come back and be effective in some of these games once he comes back as well. The Rams one, just wildly impressive coaching job by McVay and what they've been able to do from finding talent perspective. I mean, Cooper Kupp, and then you get Puka Nacua, then you got Williams that you're able to bring in, and all of a sudden you have a 3-headed monster that Stafford is able to utilize. On top of that, you've got Higbee there, and all of a sudden it's a dynamic offense with a really good play caller. So you got to just tip your cap to them there. Like the Detroit one, I think is a great call because I bet that you got a better number playing the Lions over 11.5 than you did to win the division.
Yeah.
And in that case, if they go over 11.5 to win the division, and you're getting a plus number attached to that over 11.5, where that division price, they were short favorites. They were actually prohibitive favorites going into the year as well. And so sometimes if you look at these alt markets and you're predicting something to happen inside a division bet or make the playoffs bet, you can go to alt markets where they would have to go over that total to achieve what you're betting and get a better price on it.
I start to look at some of these unders that hit, and I really hate myself that I didn't get aggressive on unders because I hated 4 of these teams this year. All have went under by more than 2 games. I hated the Commanders coming in. I hated the Patriots coming in. I hated the Giants. I hated the Jets. I bet none of them to go under, and all 4 of those teams go under. I look back on this, and I think this is a decent exercise for me, too, to start putting a little bit more conviction in these win total markets when I do think a certain way about a team, because it played out with 4 teams that I hated this year, that I picked to finish last in the majority of the divisions and all of that. It's just, and I didn't put it into effect into bets.
Yeah, I had the under in the Chargers. Really wish I had played some alt ones there because you could have gotten some good prices at under 5.5, under 6.5 there with that Chargers team. Look, every year we see this, though. There are some really, really bad teams in the NFL. There are teams that are going to win 2, 3, 4, 5 games that you don't expect to win that number of games. And the Chargers are the great example on this board, right? 9.5 was the total.
Yeah.
They won 5. That's bad. I mean, I didn't even think it could get that bad, but there are teams that are going to consistently underperform. And, like, you look at teams like the Giants where 8.5 seemed like a decent number, but you knew the challenges they were going to face with a significantly more difficult schedule this year than last year, and not a significant upgrade from a talent perspective, even if you keep Daniel Jones healthy. I actually thought they did a good job from a coaching perspective to win 6 this year and be able to get to that number. That's another team where you could have looked and said, you know what, I'm going to take under 6.5 there. Tennessee, the other one that I kind of wish I had taken the under 6.5. I took some under 7.5 in week 1, but I wish I had gone deeper there and taken a plus number, because that team, you could see the writing on the wall that Tannehill wasn't going to last long. You knew we were going to turn it over to a different offense or different quarterback, and that was going to make it difficult for them to continue to have success.
You start to look at some of these terrible teams and wondering, are there any of these teams that could be the Texans next year, right? Are there any of these low win total teams where we're going to get a 6.5 or something like that could go out and actually win 9 or 10 games? And I'm going to say something that I can't even believe that I'm saying, but I look at the Commanders, and if Drake May can play at even 75% of what C.J. Stroud played at this year, that team is not devoid of talent on the offensive side of the ball. Now they need to do something on the defensive side. They've got to spend some of that. They're going to have the most cap space in the NFL, so they're going to be able to bring in some dudes, right?
Yeah. They got rid of both their pass rushers.
Yeah, but they got money.
Yeah,
they're going to have money. They got money. They have offensive players. They're going to get Drake May. I just wonder if if they hang a 5.5 or a 6.5 or something like that on the Commanders, if that isn't kind of our, they could win. That could be an 8 or 9 win team, if Drake May is not, a complete bust as a rookie.
I'm going to be interested to see what the Giants line is, because the Giants are going to come back with a significantly weaker schedule next year. I trust Brian Daboll quite a bit in that coaching staff. I played them over 2 years ago. The schedule I thought was against them, so I had them under this year. They've got to be better next year, and they started to figure out some of the offensive and defensive issues toward the end of the season, and they play hard the entire time. I'm hoping we see a 6.5, somewhere in there for the Giants light up, because that's a team that I would be interested in taking the over, depending on what you get there. As far as the other teams that are way down, Arizona would be the other one that, look, they're going to keep Kyler.
Yeah.
They're going to have him for a full season.
Marvin Harrison, most likely.
You're going to get some upgrades there. Defense can't be worse.
Go to VSiN.com/subscribe to become a VSiN Pro subscriber today.